My name is Marcia Nedland, and I am a consultant, but I'm also the organizer for the Middle Neighborhoods Community of Practice. I'm coming to you today from Tucson, Arizona, where I can probably beat any story you have about how hot it is right now. So today we're talking about one of my very favorite topics, favorite strategy, which is block makeovers. And I love them because I do think they can be catalysts for change in neighborhoods. We have three and chime in, so maybe four panelists today talking about how they use that strategy. And it's going to be very interesting. They use it in all different ways and at different scales. So I think there'll be something for everyone. Before we get started, though, we'd love for you to tell us what sector you're from. We've started to track that information to understand a little bit more about who we're designing webinars for. So if you could just check a box for where you think you best fit in, that would be wonderful. I think Anne will share the results of that. Oh, we have a lot of Baltimore folks. This is interesting.
Yeah, we still have people voting, so I'll give this about 3 more seconds. So if you haven't voted, do it now.
Here we go. So as is often the case, our top two sort of sectors represented here today are nonprofits and local government. And then we also have some federal government intermediary. I didn't pick up which intermediary it was, a consultant or two, and a realtor. We're really actually interested in how to, get more realtors involved with us and how to promote our webinars among realtors. So if any of you, the realtor who's here, in the evaluation at the end, if you have anything to offer in terms of ideas about that, that would be great. So, okay, thanks very much for doing that. So let's move on. I just want to explain what Middle Neighborhoods is briefly before we move into our panel. So the National Middle Neighborhoods Initiative is really just focused on mobilizing attention toward those neighborhoods that are neither the most distressed in a community nor are they the healthiest. But as we've observed through research and stories and just lived experience, are actually very vulnerable right now, and they're starting to disappear either through unchecked decline or through gentrification. This initiative is mostly volunteer run, but it's a joint venture of NeighborWorks America and the National Community Stabilization Trust. And we have this community practice for people to talk about what they're doing out there. We do a research function. We have some policy analysis and advocacy, and then communication strategies, including our newsletter and our LinkedIn. And I think our LinkedIn, is that our next slide? Not quite. Okay. So if you're wondering what a middle neighborhood is, we don't have hard and fast metrics for that, but we can say that they tend to be mostly single family homes built for families with children originally. They tend to have more than 50% owner occupancy, but maybe slowly eroding on owner occupancy. The housing stock is aging, though it's still in acceptable condition, but it often lacks the features and updates that would allow it to compete well for today's home buyers, especially in some cases if those home buyers are comparing them to suburban options, or even if you're talking about a suburb, further out suburbs. One of the most interesting things about middle neighborhoods to me is that they are more racially, ethnically, and economically diverse than either their more distressed or lower income or higher income neighborhoods. We have a mapping tool if you'd like to get a quick look at the census tracts in your metro area that line up with some common measures of middle income. So that's not all there is to this equation, but it can give you a starting point for discussion. You can access that from our website. And then there's a direct link right there. And here's our LinkedIn. We're trying to communicate more through LinkedIn. So actually, I'm going to ask Anne at some point to put that link into the chat so that everyone has an opportunity. If you use LinkedIn to follow us, that would be fantastic. So our panelists today, we have with us Amber Jones from the Community Action Partnership of North Alabama, or CAPNA. She's a community engagement specialist. I've worked with Amber over the years on collecting data from surveying neighborhood residents and other kind of uh, impact projects. And she just shared with me this year, I didn't realize that they did Black makeovers there. So I'm excited to hear about how that goes for them and how they do it. And apparently they do it every year. Justin Tierson is VP of Neighborhood Investment and Community Engagement, or NICE, at Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise. Justin is a planner by training, and so he brings a lot of planning expertise to combine with sort of the community building and engagement function in that organization, and does just really, really interesting stuff. And he's got a take on block improvement strategies that really works hard to extrapolate sort of the skill building that happens in an event to other people in the community. And then Amber Lynch is an AICP, and she's also executive director of Invest DSM, which is was created by local government in Des Moines to implement a strategy for middle neighborhoods. Is my characterization. I'm not sure they actually call them middle neighborhoods, but and so they've been doing block strategies since their inception, and in part because of their funding, but in large part because of their incredible approach and staff. Their scale at which they do it is significant. Also, I just wanted to mention that Candy Ayers from CAPNA may be pitching it a little bit with Amber Jones to help tell the story, since she actually is the person who manages the program. So first, we're going to start with Amber Jones and Candy Ayers to talk about annual block makeovers in Decatur, Alabama. Thanks a lot, Amber and Candy.
Hey, good afternoon. It's good to see y'all, and thanks for having us. I'm Amber, and as Marcia mentioned, we're with Community Action Partnership of North Alabama, and we are based in Decatur, Alabama. And Decatur is a small city, a little over about 50,000 residents. Could we go to our next slide? So about a decade ago, Community Action identified a target area within Decatur to focus community building efforts and neighborhood revitalization activities. And this area is significant in a few ways. It's got 3 schools, the hospital and a medical district, as well as a public housing complex that is rather aged. Housing conditions overall are mixed. There's a historic district that is adjacent to our target area, and it's got some pretty nice, expensive, historic homes in good condition, great condition. And then as you cross over the threshold into the target area, the housing conditions become more variable. There's about 100 residential blocks in the area, so it's a pretty large area, and it's not really a single neighborhood. It's more of a conglomeration of a few different neighborhoods. Some areas are pretty nice with good housing conditions. Some areas have more blight and, I would say, less than decent housing, a lot of vacancies, and a lot of the area is just mixed between those two types. On average, residents of the target area are lower income than the city overall, but that's not really a defining feature of all of the households in the area. There's also a higher percentage of individuals and families with disabilities, and it's a mix of homeowner occupied and rental properties. So there's quite a few factors that went into identifying this area for us to focus on, and we want to build community, build partnerships to support the community and revitalize the area. Next slide, please. So starting in 2015, CAPNA began organizing a block makeover with those goals. And so each year we celebrate NeighborWorks Week, which is usually the first week of June. And we lead a coordinated effort to improve the curb appeal of multiple houses within a specified area, typically within that target area, although we have branched out some. So every year is a little bit different in terms of the number of participating residents, the number of homes, the scope of work, and the number of partners and volunteers that are available. So there's a lot of different ways that an event like this could look. And so we're going to share with y'all some of the things that we have learned over the years, and feel free to pipe in, Candy, anytime you want. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at our map of the target area again. And so this shows the location of the different block makeovers across the years and the number of homes that participated to kind of give you a little bit better idea. On the right-hand side, there's the list of the blocks. And the corresponding color of that little rectangle is also on the map, so you can see the location. So we've kind of moved around each year. Like just about everything else in the world, the block makeover event in 2020 was canceled. And then when we picked back up in 2021, we tried a little bit different strategy. And so we were more distributed across the area. We didn't just do a single block, or sometimes we do 2 contiguous blocks. And so that year you can see that's like the little sort of orange tan color, the little squares. We tried that strategy as well. But typically we choose 1 or 2 contiguous blocks and then work on homes within those areas. Next slide, please. So the first step in organizing the block makeover is to formulate the plan. So we have to figure out, where do the funds come from? How much is the budget? Who are some potential community partners that we can reach out to? And how many volunteers are going to be available to help accomplish the work that we're wanting to do? And so you're going to want to create marketing materials. We usually create flyers to spread the word, so paper flyers that we use in canvassing. We also sometimes send out postcards to the streets that we're focusing on, or save the date invitations to residents in the area, and also create social media posts to try to get the word out. For the event itself, we always want to plan to have food, snacks, drinks, and we provide lunch every day for the volunteers that are doing the work. And for our events, we also order new NeighborWorks t-shirts every year. So everybody gets a new shirt, which is nice because a lot of times you end up with paint on it or caulk or something on it. And so having those matching t-shirts is really good for group pictures as well. And so photos and footage is something that you want to think about in planning ahead, because as we've discovered, you want to get those before and after photos so that you can tell the story of, the change that we're working towards. And you also want to get with the leaders of the organization to make sure that everybody is protected legally. So we have waivers that volunteers sign on site. And then we also have the participating property owners to sign waivers and give us permission to make changes to the property. And we always want to make sure that they understand that it is a volunteer event. We are not professional painters, although we do our best and we think we do a really good job. We want to make sure that those expectations are clear. Another part of planning for the work that takes considerable time is reaching the residents that you're wanting to invite to participate. And we have found that canvassing and door knocking is really the best way to reach the residents in the focus area. We can mail out postcards, we can send out newsletters, share on social media, but nothing has really been as successful for us like knocking on doors, leaving flyers, coming back and knocking again, and having one-on-one conversations with the residents. Maybe surprisingly, it typically requires a couple conversations for people to understand that this is a community event, it doesn't cost them anything, and it's not a scam. So one thing you might think about before you go out is which areas you want to focus on. And then we also use our city's GIS website to try to figure out which homes are owner occupied versus potentially rental properties, and then decide if your organization wants to focus on homeowners, renters, or include both. We do try to focus on homeowners, but we don't exclude rental properties either. Another important step is determining the scope of work. What's the level of repairs that's needed for each home? We try to find homes with relatively minor repairs that we can improve with the carpentry skills of our volunteers, but typically we're not able to make big changes like replacing windows or major roof repairs. So if a home needs major repairs, we may not be able to include it, or we may even be able to refer them to like a weatherization program if they may be eligible for repairs like that. But we know that a new coat of paint is not going to hold rotted siding together. So we really have to be intentional about the level of repairs that are needed in the homes that are participating. We discuss the needs in the preferences with the property owners and the residents, and typically they pick out the paint colors that they want, and sometimes landscaping plants, things like that. Although we may provide guidance so that we make sure that the changes are changes that they're going to be happy with. When you're planning a block makeover, you want to think about a staging area. So we have a big canopy tent. We set up tables. You know, there's a sign-in table, snacks, supplies, sunscreen, all that stuff. And so you want to have one area for setup there. And you may, if you have a lot of volunteers, you may want to think about parking as well. We've been successful in the past partnering with a nearby church that might let us use that for parking for our volunteers as well as restroom access. The list of tools and supplies that you need can get pretty long. And again, it depends on the scope of work that you are committed to. And so planning ahead allows us to do things like make sure the things that we have are in good order, but then we also end up renting equipment like chainsaws, pressure washers, paint sprayers, and other tools like that we don't have on hand at the agency. And then a final tip is to think about waste removal. Typically, we have a dumpster and we can coordinate with the city as well with the claw truck to come around and pick up really big, uh, debris or junk that we're helping the residents clean up. Every year is a little bit different and each home has different needs, but this is just kind of a general list of the most common maintenance and repair type tasks that we tackle. Oftentimes, especially with older folks that have lived there a while or that may have physical disabilities or mobility issues, it may just be a lot of general cleanup on the outside where junk has accumulated, and they just maybe aren't able to get started or aren't able to work through that. And so general cleanup is a big part of it. There's always pressure washing, minor repairs on siding or around the roofs. And we have, in some instances, painted entire houses. And then in other instances, maybe we're just painting like the porch or the foundation, banisters, and things like that. Each year we may have special projects. And so that could include partnering with collaborators to do things like build wheelchair ramps or maybe performing more extensive tree trimming or stump grinding or creating a driveway or even an outside sitting area. Let's see, next slide. So we've had a lot of different partners over the years. And I wish that we could say each year, every partner from the previous year comes back and they're able to commit again, but it doesn't always work out that way. There is a lot of variability over the years. So some years the police and the fire departments have been able to volunteer and they can take on big tasks like demolition of unsafe backyard building or installing a fence. And then some years they haven't been able to allocate the time and the volunteers. Some years we have sponsors that send a whole team, like from Home Depot and Lowe's Home Improvement, and each team works on a separate house, and that can create some kind of friendly competition between those sponsors of who's doing the most and who's doing the best. Pepsi, our local Pepsi is really great. They support all kinds of community events. They'll send their Pepsi card out. They provide drinks, water, and a banner that you can get like individualized letters to say whatever you want. And we have that banner up the whole week to advertise the event. Indicator, the community development and the waste departments have been really great partners, providing free dumpsters for us, sending the claw truck around. And the utility company as well usually sends a team of volunteers, and they do awesome work around like fence cleaning, tree trimming, and other landscaping type tasks. Let's see, let's go to our next slide. So let's talk about some of the challenges and successes. Surprisingly, one of the more time-consuming tasks is that initial chasing down community residents to try to get participants. We tend to canvass an area multiple times, and sometimes it kind of feels like you're begging people, like, please let me tell you about our block makeover. Let me leave you this flyer. You know, we're not a cult. We're not trying to trick you. You know, this is a community service project that we do, and we just want to talk to you about pressure washing your house and your driveway, you know. So it does take a little bit of time to chase folks down. So that's something that we kind of have to prepare extra time on the front to go back and canvas, to meet with people. Another challenge is when repair needs are greater than the available resources. And so this kind of comes down to that piece about determining the scope of work, what's needed, versus what are we able to provide. I mean, we want for everybody to have realistic expectations. Our work is performed by volunteers, typically not experts. But most residents are really excited to have support in home improvement. And so some of them are out there sweating, working with us, trying to clean up their yard, even though they may be older or, you know, have mobility issues and it's 90 degrees in June in Alabama and they're out there working with us. And then sometimes residents kind of hide inside and don't interact with us much, and we try to draw them out. And we have had one instance a few years ago as well where the homeowner sat out in a camp chair in the front yard drinking beer and was telling us how to, you know, do how to do the volunteer work out there. So every year is different, and every home and resident is different. So the planning changes a little bit, kind of depending on that. And there is a lot of go with the flow that has to happen as we're locking in partners and participants and funding and having to make decisions about what all we can accomplish given the commitments that we have. So now to the successes. The good part, every year has been successful in terms of making positive change in the community. Every participating house has boosted curb appeal. It looks better. The residents are proud of it. They have more pride. And so are we and the volunteers as well. We've seen it create positive momentum in terms of nearby neighbors kind of getting pumped and like, hey, we need to put some landscaping out in our yard too. And, you know, if you have any extra mulch over there, you know, could we get a little mulch for our flower beds too? So sometimes we pick up participants late in that week, even once they see the changes that are going on. It helps neighbors build relationships with each other. They get talking more with each other. And it also contributes to our agency and our partners building community trust, that we're here for the people to help and support the residents of the city, and even develop new opportunities for other collaborations on community events around different needs. One of my favorite parts is that we build new skills. So we learn how to do things like pressure wash and stain wood and paint foundation and make repairs like, filling in holes that squirrels have chewed through and trying to figure out how to DIY these simple repairs that not only are we contributing to the community through this project, but then we get to take those skills home as well. So we really enjoy putting on the block makeovers. It is an annual event. There have been a couple years where we have done 2 events in a year, which is a lot to take on and a little stressful, but it's also a lot of fun, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of planning, but it's so worth it. And so we definitely continue to, plan block makeovers for the future. Candy, do you have anything that you want to add?
It's hard to top perfection. You've done a fabulous job. My big input would be just keep pushing, because you run into so many obstacles with so many homeowners who just don't believe you're really there to help for free with no liens going on their properties. And like she said, at the last minute, we'll get somebody else that says, "Oh, well, I didn't know you were going to do that. And I didn't know you were going to be there," and they want to hop on. So be flexible and try to explain to people that our whole goal is to change the whole block. And even if we pick up a renter's house, it needs to be changed as well so that we can impact that whole block. So that's why we start with homeowners and we add renters, so that we make a change to the whole block if we can. I'm going to let you take back over. You're doing a fabulous job.
Well, I think our final slide was just for questions.
Okay, we're gonna, well, I do want to just toss out one easy question that's in the chat, and then we'll take more questions at the end when we have a block of time to do Q&A for everyone. But Michael asks what your funding sources have been for this project.
Yeah, so we have several different sources. We get a little bit of money from NeighborWorks to support NeighborWorks Week. And we've had local banks provide funding. There's been also some in-kind donations. So sometimes it's local sponsors like insurance companies or hardware stores. They may donate money, or they may donate volunteers. Let me think. Who else do we get funding from, Candy?
We build
I know-
apartment complexes, and some of our investors in the apartment complexes or construction companies will jump on board. Bear used to give us all of our paint from Home Depot. They've changed a little bit, but that was a very good savings that we got. But we still get some donations from Home Depot and Lowe's. Random places, actually. Just, our cooperative extension service or our cooperative extension stores will donate $1,000, and then we'll buy products back from them. So,
Oh, yeah.
which is kind of how it works, and that's helping the community. So,
Okay, great. Maria, I think I'll hold your question till the end, and we can ask that question of everyone involved here, because it's a great one. But Amber and Candy, thank you so much. That's so interesting. It's really nice to meet you, Candy, for the first time. And I'm really impressed that you keep carrying this on year after year, and the kind of results that you're getting. Oh, and think about, we'll also ask everybody what you think your total budget is every year, although you've said in your case that it varies. But let's move on to C&E now. Justin Tierson, as I said, is the director of the Neighborhood Improvement and Community Engagement. Is that what it is?
Neighborhood investment and community engagement.
Investment, nice, the nice department. And so again, Justin and I've known through projects we've worked on together. And so I have never talked to Justin before about his curb appeal project program focus. And so I'm really interested to hear all about how he does it. So take it away, Justin.
Absolutely. So we call our projects curb appeal projects. So just so everyone knows the nomenclature, they are block makeover projects for the most part. And so you'll hear me refer to that. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Next slide. So to start with, C&E is a nonprofit that's been around for about 40 years. We believe the future of Chattanooga is rooted in the vibrancy of all our neighborhoods and the prosperity of all our people. Our primary mission is to create economically diverse neighborhoods filled with financially empowered citizens and housing for all. We build affordable rentals. We are getting back into building a single family homes. We help people go through financial education and eventually become first-time homeowners. But we also believe that it's important that these houses that people are moving into are in neighborhoods that are safe and thriving. And so as part of that, we do a variety of community building and engagement work to help build leaders in the community and to increase the pride, ownership, and capacity to maintain neighborhoods by the neighbors who live there. Next slide. So the work we do in the community is multifaceted, but one of the projects that we continually take on are what we call curb appeal projects. To be a curb appeal project, it has to meet 3 of our requirements. 1, it has to enhance the neighborhood aesthetic. So this is usually, it needs to maintain or improve the visual appeal of the community. It needs to create an inviting location or environment. 2, it needs to foster community pride. So we want our neighborhood residents to take pride in their neighborhood. That pride usually floats over into becoming ownership, which leads to maintenance of properties, maintenance of their public spaces, taking care of it, and pushing each other to make sure they are taking care of their own neighborhoods and their own private property. And then 3, builds leadership and maintenance capacity. We want to train our neighbors to become leaders. And so part of what we do requires a component of education as well within it, and an opportunity for neighbors to take a role, whether it's everything from planning the idea to implementing the idea to actually being the person who comes up with the idea to begin with. And we provide an opportunity for neighbors to sometimes fail in that aspect so that they can grow to become leaders. Next slide. Our projects can range to as small as 4 or 5 houses to being as large as covering an entire neighborhood. This is a great project that I really love. It's called Can I Get Your Number? One of my staffers did this with the neighborhood in Oak Grove, Chattanooga. The project here was about getting a lot of pride rebuilt in a community that has been disinvested in for multiple generations. And we started with one of the problems in the community was that we were having emergency vehicles who couldn't find where neighbors were living. And part of the issue was how do we get them to be able to identify it while also bringing a little bit of pride back. So what we did is the library at the city of Chattanooga provides a vinyl printing press. And so we took neighborhood leaders to the library and taught them how to make these little vinyl decals. And then we did that on over 200 houses in the neighborhood. We also went out and painted, scraped, and installed new mailboxes to really kind of get that going. When I say we, the we is really the neighbors. My staff may do some of the work, but the goal is to get the neighbors to take full accountability. So here you can see the pictures of neighbors going and putting on, fixing, installing their mailboxes, and all these great ideas. Next slide. Another thing that's very simple, we call it mission mulch. So usually once in the fall and once in the spring, we will go and get a large donation of mulch, whether it's from the city of Chattanooga, which has free mulch, as well as donations from a variety of businesses. And a lot of the businesses that work in these areas, they get a lot of extra mulch certain times a year and they will hold it for us. So you can see in the left picture, they will come and dump a truckload and then we will wheelbarrow it across the neighborhood to different people. In this case, one of the things we do is we actually have landscapers who live in the neighborhood who teach neighbors how to do landscaping, how to build a small, a small flower bed, how to maintain it, what flowers and trees are appropriate for the neighborhood, what are things that grow well and what are native and invasive. And so the education component, the tools of learning how to do this yourself component. So what we try to do is put as little money ourselves into it as possible. But when we spend the money, we want to spend it on things that provide outlets and opportunities for the neighbors to build themselves as people who can maintain and grow the pride and ownership of their own communities. So for instance, here in this project, we bought enough material to do 10 flower beds. We brought enough mulch to do about 25 houses. But over the next month or so, we see neighbors going with the list and the PDF that we create to Home Depot and asking for it. And the whole thing costs maybe $50. And they know what to ask for because they feel confident now because they've seen them do it. They have a list that's created by us on how to do it. And they can go in and say, this is what I want, and this is what I need. And then they come home and then they do it themselves. A lot of times you'll see neighbors helping each other out, particularly in a lot of the neighborhoods where we have a very diverse neighborhood makeup, not just in terms of race or economy or anything of that nature, but also in terms of age. And so we have a lot of times where two neighbors will go together to a Walmart and buy stuff together in bulk. And they'll have one neighbor will be in their 70s and may have the income to do it, but not the dexterity to do it. And the other neighbor may have maybe young or have kids and they can do the actual project. And so they work together, but they've learned that through our project. Next slide. As you move up the scale, what we also do are projects to invigorate the houses themselves and the safety themselves in the house. We have this project we call Rock Your Porch. Every year we go with our community. A lot of times you'll see and I'm guilty of this myself, but people just collect things on their front porch. And if you go up to somebody and say, hey, your front porch looks pretty ugly, could you clean stuff off? You're not going to get anywhere. But if you go to them and say, hey, we want to come help you repaint, restain, fix up your front porch, but you've got to clean up your front porch. You got to get everything off the front porch. And when we finish this, we expect you to have a very neat front porch and keep it neat. And so that's the trade-off we work with. And then we have carpenters who, several of them live in our neighborhood, who help and come with us and teach the neighbors what type of paints to use, how to sand a deck and get off all the old paint and put new paint on, what stains to use, all these different projects and processes that are things that people get to learn to do firsthand with the benefit of having an expert that can teach them how to do this. I will say that we have been lucky in that all of our experts have either lived in the community and volunteered their time or have businesses that have worked in the community and volunteered their time to come out and help do this education. And that's one of the ways that we help bring in this educational component. And then we get people that come back and say, great, what else can we do? What else can we do? What's the next thing we can do? And so in our neighborhood meetings, once we do one project, the neighbors come back in and say, oh, what else can we work on? How do I fix the light in my porch? Okay, that's an interesting one. Let's find somebody in the neighborhood who's got experience as an electrician. Let's do a demonstration. And then we'll go out and either get a donation, get a small grant, or I do have a small amount of money as a nonprofit that we keep in a budget to do these type of projects. And I know there'll be questions about that at the end. So I'll address most of the questions at the end. But we try to get the most bang for our buck. And I will tell you, I have a lot of my staff they're really phenomenal about digging in and finding donations or getting someone who they know in the community and building those relationships of door-to-door knocking, door-to-door flyering, spending time with the neighborhood, helping neighborhood meetings and all those things builds a level of relationships that my staff has now in terms of connections that we can almost find everything we need at a very minimal cost. Somebody asked, is there a time frame for block makeovers? I will say in our projects, most of the time comes before the project ever gets started. It's building the idea of the project, getting volunteers on board, getting your leader that's going to be on board, being your champion for this. It's finding an expert that'll come to the event. It's finding the materials you need. Sometimes it's if you've got leftover materials, the material dictates what the project's going to be doing, that you're going to be doing. Other times it's the highest need gets the most priority. So I would say that generally we spend about a month on a project, and the project itself may only take a weekend, but we would spend about a month working on it, building everything up, doing all that. And then at the end, also going back, take pictures, get the neighbors to come out and do a little video out front about the pride. And you'll see the pride that they have in the work that they've done because they've put work and effort into it too. Things that, I hate to put it this way, may feel small to a lot of people, but the smiles and the passion you hear, and somebody comes in and says, I built this little landscape island. I painted my porch. You know, that's real emotion, and it's really something that they get and people love to talk about. And it's also a pride issue that they'll go to their neighbor and be like, I know how to fix that. You should be fixing this too. Let me show you how to fix that. Next slide. So what's the impact of the work that we do? Generally, we get about 15 to 20 neighbors at a curb appeal event. As I said, the curb appeal projects can be anywhere from 5 houses to 200 houses. I will say most of them are generally under a dozen houses. We try to do about 6 to 10 curb appeal events a year. I will say that we work in 2 different neighborhoods, so that's really 3 to 5 a year per neighborhood. Over that process, we usually get about 60 homes that we've done some form of improvement on. It can be very minimal landscaping. It can be very dramatic, replacing a window, repainting a house, refixing fixing a deck. But the real impact that we look at is that we get hundreds of neighborhoods who are trained to make improvements to their homes and maintain their homes. One of the biggest issue in a lot of these neighborhoods is that people have either no longer have the skill set, never had the skill set, or don't believe they have the capacity or funds to do the work to maintain their houses. And then the houses get worse and worse, and small issues become big issues, and big issues can lead to a fair amount of people who get in a situation where they can no longer afford the improvements they must have to their house, and they find themselves forced to leave their own house. We want to see the opposite of it. A house should be a generational wealth building tool that you can pass on to your next generation. And this is something we want to see. And so if we can get more people in these neighborhoods that own houses, take care of their houses, great. If we can get renters who learn all these tools, make friends with people as you go through the generations of so-and-so I know, they take good care of their house. They're getting ready to sell their house. I can buy that house. Building those connections also helps. Next slide. All right. Then there's a whole bunch of what I call bonus impacts. These are the things that as a nonprofit we look for that may not be the direct impact that individual neighbors look for when we do this work. Opportunities let neighbors become leaders. My goal is to go from a neighborhood that has no neighborhood association to a neighborhood association with elected leaders that have the capacity to maintain and provide a voice for their community. And so we can leave and they can keep running. And that's a major goal. This is a great opportunity because there are projects that range in size and scope. So different leaders or potential leaders can have the opportunity to step in and take different leadership roles. There's also opportunities because a lot of these are low risk, that if they fail at something, it isn't the end of the world, right? So giving them the opportunity to try, fail, and pick them back up again is always part of that. Opportunity for neighborhood businesses to support and extend their business relationships. It's a big deal. Most of our neighborhoods are in urban areas, so they're usually surrounded by a corridor of businesses and things that everything from tiendas that'll give free food or donations of food to small contractors who live in the communities who will provide additional material or expertise, to larger stores, to grocers who will give us gift certificate, or restaurants that'll provide space for us. All these things. And it is my job to make sure that they understand this is your business getting the opportunity to expand its clientele by working in these communities. And in return, you've got to actually provide something of value to these communities. And so those relationships build up over time to the point now where we have businesses that have no relationship to the project we're doing. But because they want to be good neighbors and because they love what we're doing, they want to join in, and they will join in. And then the last is increased value of community and goodwill from the city. I can't tell you the number of times that a city that for 3, 4, 5 decades has not invested in the community, and the mindset is it's a poor neighborhood, I'll invest in it, and it'll just, whatever investment I provide, a park, roads, sewer system, whatever it is, it's just going to fall apart because no one maintains anything in that community. It's a horrible stereotype, but the reality is that they're going to put money where they think it'll get the most value in terms of continued usage and be well used and loved. So if we can prove that this is a community that has pride, ownership, and loves its public spaces as well as its private spaces, it builds goodwill to be able to get the city to bring things in. Not to mention, we just had a recent park opening. The city of Chattanooga is on a park building spree, which we're very happy about. And they just opened 5 parks in the last 3 weeks. And 4 of the parks they opened, they had less than 30 people attend the grand opening. In Oak Grove, in one of our neighborhoods that they opened a park, we had over 100 neighbors show up. I guarantee you that's something they're going to remember. And the next time we ask for additional park stuff, they're going to be like, yeah, we know they'll use them. They show up. They love this stuff. So building that relationship takes time, but it's something that through these processes, I let our council person know every time we have a curb appeal event, here it is, coming out, take a look at it, see the good work your neighbors are doing. We let city council know, we let elected officials know, we let building department, we let the police department, we let the parks department know. We get city staffers to come out, and you'd be surprised how many of them will find money in the budget that didn't exist for small things. You know, we're working right now on a project that wasn't quite completed the way we wanted, but because we built the goodwill, the city's come back and been like, surely I've got money somewhere else I can put towards this to finish this out right, because this community deserves to have it done right. Next slide. So the biggest lesson learned, small grants lead to big opportunities. We try to keep our curb appeal projects to around $2,500 or less. I have a budget that I try to keep so I can cover that, but really I try to push my staff to get 60, 70, 80, 100% of that covered. And so that we can get as much of that in terms of donation and donate material, in-kind gestures, or just cash to help going through those. If you can find a small grant, you can really start pushing through those things. Know your audience. You learn this over time. Summers are hot, winters are cold. These are times when you plan a big painting project in the middle of July. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to spend a lot more money on water. It's going to be harder to get volunteers. You're going to have to make sure you've spent more time doing the logistics, like putting up cooling tents and things like that because of that. Same thing in the winter. Weekends are for family. A lot of times we forget the fact that neighbors who live in these communities are volunteering their time. We tend to think of it as a kind of coming from a jaded place a lot of times as planners, as nonprofits who work in these communities, like, this is your neighborhood. Why would you not do this? Well, if somebody is working 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, and the weekend's the only time they have with a family, you are asking to steal time away from their family. So take that into account when you plan out what these are, and also make them family friendly events so they can spend the time with their family in the event and they can learn something together. And then the last thing is backup plans are worth their weight in gold. Inevitably, it's going to rain. Inevitably, there's going to be a sewer line break. Inevitably, somebody asked about lead paint. Inevitably, you're going to do a paint sample check to make sure there's no lead paint, so you don't have to do any remediation on a house, only to find out that you get through the first 4 layers of paint and find out there's another layer underneath that has lead, and now you've got to call the whole thing off on that house, have a backup house you're going to do it. Same type of thing. We've had neighbors who have come out and said, we've started painting a house, said, we don't like the color of that house. And so have backup plans for these things. How are you going to handle these things? Make sure you have waivers so that you can have people sign off on the waivers to protect yourself. It's also important to make sure you as an organization are in the long run there protected, because you as an organization are an incredibly valuable community partner. And so how do you protect yourself in that? Getting to know what you're going to do about restrooms. What are you going to do about, okay, what if this person sells the house 2 days before you're supposed to have the event and the new owner has no idea this is going to happen? How are you going to manage that? All these things are things that you should think through, and that list will grow, but also become easier to deal with as you become more accustomed to doing these projects. And so the best way is to get in and know that you're going to fail a little bit, but the amount of work you do will contribute so much more in terms of what you're working on in these communities. Last slide, I think. Yep, and that's my question slide too. I'll turn it over to Marcia as to if you want to ask questions or save time.
I think we'll hold the questions to the end, but we've got some really great ones coming in. And we'll turn it over next to Amber Lynch, who has yet another take on the way that you can do block projects with neighbors. So Amber, welcome again and thank you, and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Marcia, for having me. And it really is interesting to hear how you can kind of attack the same situation in really different ways. So hopefully the takeaway is that you can configure this type of effort in lots of different ways and still have it be successful. I am going to start just with a little bit about Des Moines. We're a mid-sized city, so our population is about 215,000 or so. And we're in a metro area that has been one of the fastest growing in the Midwest for the last decade. So what that means is, like many central cities, the housing stock that we have to work with is much older than it is in our suburbs. And so we are kind of working with those dynamics. The other thing we have here is in Iowa, our local governments are pretty property tax reliant as a big revenue stream for themselves. And so the condition of our residential properties really matters to keeping values stable and appreciating over time to make sure that we are collecting the revenue that we need to provide all of the services to our residents. As far as InvestESM goes, I'll talk a little bit more about our organization in a minute, but we serve fairly small geographies within the city of Des Moines. You can see those highlighted on the map. We currently have 4 neighborhoods that we're working in, and then 2 more that we'll be expanding into next year. We are specifically tasked with working with the city's middle market neighborhoods. So Marcia alluded to that in the beginning. This was kind of a revamp of the city's revitalization strategy about 6-7 years ago now, where we were put into place as kind of a mechanism to prevent more neighborhoods from becoming distressed and disinvested. Because we have such old homes in our city, deferred maintenance is pretty widespread. And in certain pockets, that's really brought our housing conditions downhill. So we're trying to get in front of that in our more middle market neighborhoods where our conditions are more average. We also tend to work where our housing stock is the oldest, at least for right now. And so a lot of the housing stock we're working with is early 1900s era. Let's see. So we are a nonprofit organization. We have a little bit of a unique origin story. We were created by a collaboration between our city and county governments. And then our funding comes from the city and county as well. Their source for that is a local option sales tax that was passed in 2019 through a voter referendum. And so we get a small portion of that sales tax revenue to fund our organization and the activities that we do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide just for the sake of time, but just know that you'll get copies of the slides and a recording of this afterwards, so you can always come back. We do a variety of things. So we have 5 different grant programs that we operate. And let's see. My slide doesn't want to move. Thank you, Anne. One of our grant programs is our Block Challenge. We are in the 5th year of the program. And much like our previous presenters, our goals are really to improve curb appeal through kind of quick win projects, so that are exterior focused on the exterior of the home. And then another kind of explicit goal for us is really trying to connect neighbors together and improve the social capital that we find in the neighborhood. Because we're a very place-based organization, that geography is kind of already identified. And so this grant program is available throughout the neighborhoods that InvestESM serves. I think the other thing that we hope for with our Block Challenge grant is that it is kind of an entry-level program. We try to keep it really easy and user-friendly for our participants. And so then it builds their confidence to take on larger home improvement projects. And so we really view it as that stepping stone to get them into other grant programs that we offer. In terms of results, as Marcia mentioned, we have a fairly sizable budget each year. And so we're able to kind of do this at a pretty big scale. During the first 4 years that the program ran, we completed 574 projects across our 4 neighborhoods, which was just over $2.5 million in total investment. And you'll see in a minute in the program mechanics, this is a matching grant for us, but for every dollar that we've put into a project, property owners tend to invest about $1.50. And that stayed fairly even over the last 4 years. We have another 7 teams and 85 or so participants that are organizing this year. Oh, next slide, please. There we go. It is a seasonal program for us. So instead of doing it over the course of a week, we open these applications up for over the course of a summer. And so we'll accept applications from April through August, and then participants have 90 days to complete their project. We do allow some flexibility if there's, issues with a contractor or a supply delay or things like that. But typically, we're trying to have all of those projects completed within one season. We talked about how this was already an exterior only program, really focused on that curb appeal. The other piece to that is that it needs to be a project that you can see from the street. So if somebody wants to build a deck in their backyard, that's great, but we have a different program for that. They need to have a street facing component for this particular program. We do a dollar for dollar match up to a maximum amount for each participant, but we do require that participants apply as a team of neighbors together. And the more neighbors they have, the more generous our incentives are for each person. We also try to have that visibility. So again, getting them concentrated on a particular block or set of blocks. And so the graphic kind of shows how that can work. We just ask that each participant can see another participant on their team from their front door. So they can wrap around the corner, that's okay, but they need to kind of be in that concentrated area. It really does a lot to drive confidence of the surrounding neighbors and get other people thinking, oh, maybe I should invest in my property too. We do allow each participant to complete their own scope of work. So it's not like everybody needs to come in and do the same project. They can each pick their individual project, and that way they can flex the amount of money that they want to spend. And it kind of, doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. And then we do an exit survey at the end of each program year so that we can get feedback on the user experience and figure out how we can kind of better support this in the future. Here's just a quick snapshot of what that process looks like. So when the team organizes themselves, we do an information meeting with our staff. Typically, we like to do that in person, in somebody's driveway or front yard, but we can do it on Zoom as well. They submit their team application along with individual scopes of work. We collect before photos and then after photos at the end. Once our staff has reviewed and approved projects, those participants have 90 days to complete them, and then they submit their after photos along with a reimbursement form that outlines all their expenses. We cut them a check, and then we really encourage them to get back together as a team and celebrate what they've achieved. Let's see, next, there we go. We have flexed this program a little bit, even just across our 4 neighborhoods. We found some of our higher capacity neighborhoods, neighbors already know each other, and so it's very easy for them to get groups of neighbors together. We have some lower capacity, lower income neighborhoods where they just don't know each other as well, and that's been a little bit of a barrier to entry. And so we have lowered our requirements in terms of the number of neighbors that need to be on a team and gotten a little more generous with that beginning incentive. We do allow DIY projects. So in some cases, homeowners or property owners are doing this work themselves. In other cases, they are hiring a contractor to do it. It just depends on how complicated or substantial the project is. And then we also do allow year-over-year repeat participation. And so sometimes we'll have somebody come back who's participated in a prior year, and now they enjoyed it so much that they volunteer to lead a team in a future year. Let's see, next, just some real quick examples. So driveways, it's amazing what some new flat work does for the look and feel of a home. See next here. Front door replacements or even putting on a storm door. We get new house numbers on occasion or a new mailbox. Let's see. Landscaping, of course, is a big one. We'll do dead tree removal as long as they replace it with a tree. So you can't just remove a tree. You have to put a new one somewhere on your property, trying to protect that canopy. Let's see. And then sometimes people will go as far as all new exterior paint and windows or replacing siding on a home. So it really does run the gamut of, sometimes we have $50 projects and we're reimbursing $25, and sometimes we have $10,000 projects and they're getting that $2,500 incentive from us. So let's see. Retaining walls and replacing front steps, those are common things as well. Okay, so really quickly, I know we're at time here, but some of the benefits that we've seen, I think, really echo what some of our other presenters have mentioned. We're seeing that neighbors are getting to know one another through this process, and it's leading to more block parties, to them forming Facebook groups so that they can better communicate with one another. We've had Halloween decorating competitions come out of this on blocks that have participated, and other things like that. Along with Chattanooga and Alabama, we're seeing greater pride in where people are living, and also that kind of leadership development of, hey, I feel equipped now to either help my neighbor with something or to organize on behalf of the neighborhood. We've had Block Challenge team leaders go on to become leaders in the neighborhood associations, and really help to drive engagement at a higher level. This really is kind of a low cost, high reward. It can flex to whatever budget you have, and it can get visible improvements quickly in a concentrated area. And that really goes a long way towards changing the overall perception of a neighborhood. Again, it's kind of that stepping stone. We've also seen neighbors referring each other or helping each other with referrals for contractors, and contractors coming into places that they might not have looked at twice before, because instead of having one small project, now they've got 5 or 6 that they can do at the same time. Let's see. About every third click. There we go. I just wanted to mention that the city of Des Moines, after our first year of running this program, they felt that it was so successful that they designated a pot of funds to make it available outside of our special investment districts, so that it is an opportunity citywide. The first year, InvestDSM administered that program for them. Now they have 3 staff who support the program. It is not just their full-time job. They do other things as well, but in the summer, I know this is a lot of their work. I just gave some examples of their first year budget versus last year's budget, and you can kind of see the differences in the number of projects they were able to support, and the total investment that leveraged. The yellow splotches on the map are InvestDSM's neighborhoods. We get a lot of the city's teams popping up around those areas because they're kind of primed and looking for the incentive that's open and available to them. I think the city's also done some other interesting things for lower income households. So they, with their budget allocation, they set aside 50% of the funds and reserve those for low and moderate income neighborhoods where neighbors might be a little bit slower to organize a team. They were having such a rush of applications when they opened on May 1st. That they really had to kind of divide the funds into higher capacity and lower capacity neighborhoods. They've also started offering more of a 75% match to lower income households, and they just ask for some sort of proof of other public assistance rather than doing complicated income verifications like you would do with federal funds. So that's kind of how some unique ways that they've handled those pieces. I've got 2 more. I'm almost done, Marcia. Some testimonials on program results. This is from the city's exit survey last year, but they had a nice slide that was all ready to go, and it echoes a lot of the feedback that we received for our program as well. Just about getting to know neighbors, about just having that confidence to invest, feeling like the city is a partner in that, or InvestDSM is a partner in that. And then also kind of the ease of use for a program like this. Yep, so lessons and challenges here. Similar to my co-presenters, you know, it is low cost. I think there's a lot of benefits to this that go well beyond the improvements to the home. Yes, curb appeal drives perception, which ultimately drives demand for living in these places or resale values. But it also is about getting neighbors to be proud of where they live, getting them to know each other and be kind of a helping hand in the future when they need it as well. We really aim to keep this user-friendly. It is not funded with federal dollars. I think I saw a question pop up in the chat. This is totally a local program, although I borrowed a lot of the framework from a community in Oswego, New York, so I did not come up with it myself. But we really try to keep the process simple, to be flexible if things come up for our participants and they need an extension on their project. We give everybody a yard sign. That's probably been the best thing that we have put money into in terms of marketing. Ours are cute. They say, I'm invested in my community. And when you have 10 yard signs pop up along a block, suddenly you have a lot of other neighbors that are calling you or visiting your website trying to figure out how they can get involved. You know, I think Justin mentioned this as well. Who are you aiming to serve? So really knowing what your audience is. There are a lot of different configurations for a program like this, and the demographics and kind of the cultural mindset a little bit of your property owners is going to make a difference in your program design. So you're going to want to tailor that program design to the people that you're serving. And then, you know, with the pie chart here, one of the things is it really helps get your property owners' dollars off the sidelines and invested into your buildings, into your homes. You know, these homes and buildings last much longer than one particular owner. We are passing them from owner to owner over time. And so it really helps to incentivize that and to help give people the confidence to invest. You know, for the city's program, only 8% said they would have completed their project last year without the grant program. And so I think that's a pretty significant and pretty telling example of the dividends that this can pay. So I think that is my last slide. Again, my contact information is here as well. And so we can transition to questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Amber. Even though I've heard Amber speak about this program a couple of times, I always learn new things because they keep learning new things themselves. And it was really interesting to see how the city decided to take that program and try and expand it, but adapt it to the differing capacities of other places in the city. So I'm just going to turn to some of the questions that we have in our chat. I think everyone's described their funding sources. These are all local funding sources. Justin, I'm just amazed at how much you're able to find your technical expertise right in the neighborhoods that you serve, that you find landscapers and contractors and all of that. That's pretty amazing. And that's, I think, a testament to how much outreach you do to get to know your neighbors. We have a question about, you know, in the cases where you're like in Amber Jones's situation, where there are volunteer teams taking on a lot of the work. Do you ever have a problem with people complaining about the work, or, you know, and how do you address that? Or Candy or Amber Jones? Yeah. Go ahead, Candy. I think you're ready.
Yeah, in the years that we've done it, we've honestly only had one person who really complained. And although he signed everything and set up, he was excited that Home Depot was going to do his home. However, when they were doing the spray painting, they got, believe it or not, some paint on the bottom of his shingles. And he was upset because the shingles that hung over had some paint on them. Although they painted the whole house and a fence that wrapped all the way around his whole backyard, that was what he was upset about. But he got over it. But it was still, he actually is on one of our videos that you can see him talking about it. Not talking about that, but talking about the project, how wonderful it was.
Yeah.
But his only complaint was that.
Yeah.
Paint on the shingle. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, so one answer I sort of expected for you guys to say is that you know, you try and address a lot of that in the pre-work, right? But so it's really, obviously you're doing some great pre-work, Amber and Candy, because you've only had one instance of that. Amber, Lynch, and Justin, have you ever had any sort of negative situations that got into Facebook groups or anything like that?
We just had one actually.
Oh.
So there is an organization called World Changers. It's a religiously based organization that goes to cities across the U.S. and they do work on houses in low income and disinvested neighborhoods. We had worked on a house that we had contacted the landlord. The landlord was okay with it. We met with the renter. Renter seemed okay with it. Well, day of, we're replacing a fence, putting a new fence in, and the tenant comes out and is screaming bloody murder. You're, I don't like this. The landlord's going to be upset with you doing that. This whole thing is wrong. This isn't what I wanted. It's like that. My point of view is if you've done the front work of having the conversations with them, then you kind of just stand your ground and say, first off, please don't be ungrateful about the work that you're getting, that another person who is in equal need could have gotten. Second off, you'd say, like, is there a real issue here? If there's a real issue here, let's identify and let's fix this. But if it's a cosmetic issue, well, then no big worry about that. And then on the third step is, since this was a landlord had given us permission, renter seemed to be on board, wasn't on board. We notified the landlord and made the landlord take care of it as well. Meet with their renter and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. So.
Okay. Yeah. And Amber, Lynch, you're all of your participants pick their own projects, right? So you're
They
probably.
do. They do. So we've kind of avoided at least that type of complaint. You know, there's always going to be somebody who has a complaint. And, you know, I think we've just kind of learned that we have to deal with that as best we can in the moment, but carry forward because overall it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, great. We had someone say they really like the creative names. I think they were talking about your programs, Justin, all the great names you have. Can I get your number and stuff like that? That's great.
I will say that's entirely because I have creative staff. I do not come up with any of those. They come up with wonderful names for these projects.
I guess people probably saw in the chat that Daniel Kravitz says they just finished working on a right of entry and private property waiver for, I don't know what specific reason he was referring to at the time, but it's really nice that there is, Justin, sort of like, do you guys understand why that might be a useful thing to have? Why
I mean,
might
from
that
our
be?
point of view, it's good to have a waiver for everything. We try to have one all-inclusive waiver.
Okay.
And so we may have some language that we clean up at the bottom of every waiver that specifies these are the actions that will be taken. But overall, it's the same waiver form for most things. That way there's it's less work on our part, and B, then we spend the time, if we're crafting the waiver, more so identifying exactly what it is we're doing rather than worrying about all the other languages of, am I making sure that I put language in here to cover the owner, the renter, ourselves, a contractor, a volunteer, all these things. We've got one that was worked out with one of our lawyers and we just use that one.
Okay. Maybe Anne will try and get Justin's, and if you could follow up with Daniel too, and we can include those when we do the follow-up email that conveys the links to everything here. We talked a little bit about lead paint. Justin, in your case, you mentioned taking a swatch of paint to make sure that you weren't in that situation. Amber and Candy, is lead paint an issue for you? What do you deal with it? What do you do?
Well, thus far we haven't done, do you want to, you can go to Amber. We haven't run into a big problem because we don't do as much scraping and sanding to get down to the bad paints. What we've been dealing with are newer paint jobs that have just wore out.
I see.
So thus far we've been okay. Now my brain is going, oh goodness, what are we going to do when we run into a big situation?
When you do run into one.
Right. It's that pre-work that helps a lot.
Yeah. So Justin, you said that I mean, it sounds like it's actually happened to you before, Justin, that you've come across a situation where you couldn't do the project because you discovered lead paint.
Correct. I think probably the people who are asking the question have identified this before, that the kicks up the amount of work you have to do to protect the house, the volunteers, everybody who's working on it, to a higher level that's so expensive that it's generally one of those things that it's a no-go. We
Mhm.
try to, and that's one of the things, is we identify what is the capacity of what we have, and we make it clear. If we run into this, then it's a no-go. It doesn't matter how much there may be a need here, and it doesn't mean we don't try to help them find maybe a grant for home repair, low interest, no interest grant for home repair, or something of that nature. But a professional is going to have to come in and handle the remediation at this point. Same thing if we're working on something and we find asbestos. Like it's just, there are certain things that are beyond our capacity, and we're just honest about it.
Mhm. Here's a question. Do you have secure building permits?
I mean, I'll take a quick answer and I'll let anyone else.
Yeah.
We make sure that we do work that doesn't trigger a building permit. We build housing as well, so we have experience pulling permits and going through all that process. But for the most part, we're not running electrical, we're not running water, we're not running a lot of things that require it. If we're tearing down a porch and replacing it, it's usually to the same specs that we're replacing it with. And so generally code enforcement works with us on those issues. But for the vast majority of what we do, we're not doing anything that triggers the requirement of a permit.
And Amber, do you rely on your participants to figure that out?
I
What do
mean,
you-
we certainly advise around it. So we do have instances where a building permit is required. We try to flag that for the participant so that they can work with their contractor to handle it. But InvestESM does not apply for those permits on the owner's behalf.
Okay. And Candy and Amber, is the scope of your work such that it doesn't trigger a building permit requirement, or do you get those?
Yeah, we haven't done that before.
Okay.
And-
Just because, oh,
That's okay. If it's something bigger than what our normal is, we'll refer to like our weatherization program, and then they get all the building permits
Got
and things. We don't
Yeah.
tackle anything that's out of scope.
got it. Only because it's in the order of my chat here. I had asked Justin if he would pull up one of his instructional PDFs that he creates about different projects in order to, and show us. So if you can share your screen about that, that'd be great, Justin.
You need to give me permission to share my screen.
Oh, I do. Okay. Let's see if I can do that. I think maybe Anne has to do that. And Anne, I know sometimes it's hard for you to even touch anything without setting off. Okay, we'll work on that. And meanwhile, we'll go on to something else. I think, Abner, you probably learned that this Block Challenge grant is a local thing, so it doesn't extend to other states. We have a great link in here from Theodore about the city of Shaker Heights. They have a Moreland model block program, and if it's Moreland, that probably involved my colleague Kamala Lewis, who's fantastic at all things community development. Michelle wants to voice her question. Michelle, can we, let's see if you can unmute her, Anne.
Is unmuted, so I'm not.
Okay.
Oh,
Sure,
I
maybe she's
didn't
not
have a
there.
question.
Oh,
I'm
there-
sorry. I didn't realize.
Oh,
I
okay.
Okay.
I apologize.
Let's see. This is a great one. Has air property with unclear title ever been an issue? For any of you?
Yes.
Yes. Wow,
Um,
interesting. What happened?
Just title issues in general. I mean, I think that's one of our verifications that we do on the front end. We do allow rental properties to come through, but we have to have some sign off from the title holder of the property. And so in most cases, I think we've been able to work through it. I think we had one where we had to have an affidavit signed. There was something about, it was in probate. And so that transfer of title as an inheritance was in progress. And so we just had to have something signed that gave us permission. But typically that's a disqualifying factor for our program. It has to be the title holder who's on the application.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here's one that's clearly for you, Amber Lynch. Michael asks, do you ever run into conflicts with other nonprofits doing home repairs? For example, Habitat's Rock the Block in Des Moines.
Yeah, we haven't run into a conflict so far. So our local Habitat does do a Rock the Block program, which I think is has been taken nationally by Habitat affiliates. And it's very similar to kind of the volunteer-driven program that Amber and Candy were talking about, where it's kind of an organized week of projects, and the volunteers are typically the ones that are doing the home repair. Because that program for Habitat is an income-based program and ours is not, often Habitat ends up serving a different population than we are, and they might be able to, even if we're in the same general geographic area, they may be able to pick up some of the homeowners who have zero financial capacity and therefore don't have an ability to participate in InvestESM's version. So they end up being complementary to each other more so than they conflict.
That's great. Here's a fantastic question I hadn't thought of from Nidra Fears at the Greater Chatham Initiative in Chicago. Have you ever done block improvements for business owners? Anybody? Would you consider it?
We have done on small. So for instance, we have in the middle of one of our neighborhoods, there's a church we work with a lot. So we have done some small landscaping stuff for them. We haven't ever been asked, I guess, but and maybe one of y'all could have a better story about this, but if one asked us to and it was part of the community and they were a active member of the community at large, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
We have had a few businesses participate as part of a team. They tend to be the ones that are kind of, that old corner store building, kind of on a primarily residential block. We have other programs that tend to be a better fit for our business districts. But we have had kind of the occasional storefront that's been part of our block challenge teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a fantastic idea, Nidra. I can't think off the top of my head why you couldn't apply most of the same steps and goals and everything else to it. I think it's so often is the fact, as you well know, Nidra, that, that like the budgets and the nonprofits and the city departments and everything are so separate for commercial property versus residential. But you are one of those rare organizations that really does do a lot for its business district. And I think it would be fascinating to try and do this, especially with your business district. I love it. Here's a question. From Rachel, do you provide training to volunteers who come in from the outside the neighborhood to enhance their understanding of the root causes of neighborhood disinvestment or to facilitate relationship building and respect between volunteers and residents? I know that, that's the volunteer and resident thing can be it has opportunities for there to be misunderstandings and unpleasantness. Like Candy, was it you, Candy, who said you had one guy or maybe it was Amber, you said you had one guy who sat in a lawn chair with his beer and told everybody else what to do. So ideally, that's probably not going to make the volunteers feel really happy about being there. But can any of you speak to, especially, I guess, Amber Jones and Candy, because you do have volunteers coming in, like, how does that work out? Do you think that the people being helped are ever judged by your volunteers? Do you think that the people you're helping are afraid of being judged by volunteers? And do you do anything to help smooth out that relationship? One of you got to unmute. There you go, Candy.
I think our volunteers, especially a lot that come from our agency, have really good caring hearts. and in most cases know that what we're trying to do is to help the whole community, whether the person living in the home is capable of doing it and just chooses to spend their time in other manners. We may be helping the person across the street who has to look at that house every day with the peeling paint and the overgrown bushes. So I would like to think that we are showing that everybody just needs to be kind to one another and to jump in and help. And our volunteers that come from like Decatur Utilities and things of that nature, in the past, they've actually painted a house where the lady who was 92 living there, her husband had worked for Decatur Utilities his whole life.
Oh, wow.
And so we get unique things like that that happen every year. We get something that's just unexpected. And so this year, you know, we always get unexpected people that just catch you off guard with what they say. So I want to say it's positive, and it creates, you know, more engagement so that, you know, they bring their families down. I'm like, yeah, we painted this house. I bring my family, 45 minutes away and say, this is the house, these are the houses we did this year. And it just, you bring people in from the outside, and hopefully the word spreads. COVID slowed us down some, but I think we're getting people engaged again. A lot of good people retired after COVID that hurt with police and fire departments. So it's coming back, I think.
Okay, great. While I'm doing this, were we ever able to give Justin permission to share his screen? And we don't know, I guess. Oh, you're co-host now, Justin. So let's show Justin's PDF anytime you're ready, Justin. And our next webinar, I'll say, meanwhile, is that we don't have a date set for it yet, but we're finalizing all the panelists, but to talk about interest rate buy downs as a way to assist both homeowners with home repairs and home buyers in this high interest rate environment. And so I think that's going to be an interesting topic. It used to be a common strategy. I'm showing my years back before interest, the last time we had a high interest rate environment. But I haven't seen a lot of it lately. So here's one of Justin's PDFs. Oh, so he has the difficulty, the duration. Oh, this is great.
I will also say that our end goal eventually is to have our communications and marketing team that has a graphic designer on board to take the instructions and make them graphics like an IKEA assembling thing. We are not there yet. I hate to put it bluntly, they have more important things to do than take this to that graphic level. So as I find time for them, I'm going to have them do that. But essentially, at the end of every one of our curb appeal events, this is one of the things that my team is tasked with, is that we put together this very basic thing that just identifies how difficult it is, what time of year you should be doing it, how much we expect it to cost and why, the materials you'll need, and then a step-by-step walkthrough of how to do it yourself. And then we just pull them into PDFs, put them on our website. We've actually gotten to the point now where the city of Chattanooga, their neighborhood services department, will then post it for other neighborhoods to use as well. And so it's very simple. It takes 20 to 30 minutes when you're done with the project, because you got it fresh in your mind if you remember to do it right after the project, and you can get it done really quickly. And to be fair, I think it'd be really, I'm going to throw the gauntlet at Marcia. It'd be really, really great if we could have a repository where other people could do these type of projects and just load all the PDFs to one location. We could all look at them.
Good idea. If you would send us this one, Justin, we'll include it in our, sharing of resources so that people see what you're doing. And it also occurs to me that sometime you may find some enthusiastic young intern who likes to do videos, and you could do a YouTube channel with, some videos on how to do some of these projects. Okay, so back to Anne and our last slide to say goodbye. I definitely want to thank all of our panelists today. They're so smart, so much interesting, detailed, practical information. I really love it. Please email us, Marcia@middleneighborhoods.com, if you have any ideas for webinars you'd like to see, case studies, news stories that you want to share or anything, we always like to promote our partner, Center for Community Progress. They have a Cornerstone webinar series, which is really well done. And you'll have an evaluation at the end of this where you get to share some of your ideas for future webinars. And finally, because you participate in this webinar, you will automatically become a member of the Middle Neighborhoods Community of Practice. But if you ever want to take a look at our website, adjust your preferences or anything like that, there we are at ncst.org/middle neighborhoods. Thanks again, everybody. Please let us know about your experiences with Block Makeovers, and hope you do one soon. Have a great weekend.